Hi, welcome to Quality and Food Safety with Martha, where we get to learn, apply and excel. This is where we break down complex topics of quality and food safety to help emerging and practicing professionals to be the best they can be. Let's get learning.
We spend a lot of time thinking about what we eat. We're looking at calories, nutrients, organic versus conventional, all that stuff. But there's this whole other side to our food, a hidden side that goes way beyond the nutrition label. Today, we're diving into food integrity. And we're going to ask a pretty simple but really powerful question. Is the food on your plate actually what you think it is? Okay, let me ask you something. When I say food safety, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's probably an accident, right? A batch of lettuce gets contaminated with E. coli, or some chicken is left out on the counter too long. Our minds just naturally go to unintentional mistakes. But what if I told you that some of the biggest, most significant threats to our food supply aren't accidents at all? What if they're deliberate, completely planned? And that one little distinction, well, it changes absolutely everything. So let's start with the first, and honestly, the most common type of intentional threat. It's called food fraud. It's all about deception, and it's driven by one very simple and very, very powerful motivator. The official definition is pretty clear. It's the intentional deception for economic gain using food. And those are the key words right there. Intentional and economic gain. This is not a mistake in the factory. No, this is a calculated business decision designed to trick you. So here's the thing to remember. The goal of food fraud is always, always about money. It's about making a bigger profit by cheating the system and, by extension, cheating you, the consumer. So how does this actually play out in the real world? Well, think about that pricey wild-caught salmon you bought. What if it's actually just cheaper farmed trout with a fancy label? Or that expensive extra virgin olive oil is secretly being diluted with soybean oil? This stuff happens all the time, misrepresenting where food comes from, using cheap fillers. It's all about substituting, diluting, and mislabeling to cut costs and make an extra buck. But what happens when the motive isn't profit? This is where our conversation takes a much darker turn. Now we're shifting to something called food defense. And as you can see, the motive here isn't money, it's malice. Food defense is all about protecting our food from intentional acts of contamination. Now listen closely to the intent here, because it's chilling. The goal is to cause widespread public health harm. This could be anything from an act of terrorism to an attack by a disgruntled employee who wants to do as much damage as possible. So with this, the motivation is a complete 180. The goal isn't to make a quick buck by swapping out an ingredient. The goal is to make people sick. It's to spread fear and to disrupt society itself. It's fundamentally malicious. This table really just lays it all out, nice and clear. With food fraud, your motivation is economic gain, money. The act is deception, like watering down honey. The goal? Make money. Simple. But then you flip over to food defense. The motivation is causing harm, maybe driven by some ideology. The act is a direct attack, like tainting a food supply. And the goal is to create illness, fear, and chaos. They really couldn't be more different. So we've got these two major threats. One is driven by greed, the other by malice. So what's the opposite? What are we striving for? Well, that brings us to food authenticity. Food authenticity is the goal. It's the promise that what you're buying is exactly what it says it is. It's ensuring that the food is from where they say it's from and that its contents are precisely what's declared on the label. It's really the gold standard of trust between you and the person who made your food. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Okay, fraud, defense, they're both bad. Why are we splitting hairs over the definition? Well, it matters. It matters a whole lot. Because you can't fight a threat if you don't understand its motivation. And here is exactly why that distinction is so critical. To fight profit-driven fraud, a company does something called a vulnerability assessment. They ask, where could someone swap our olive oil for a cheaper one? And the fix might be adding a specific chemical test at that point in the chain. But for harm-driven attacks, they need a mitigation strategy. They have to ask, where is our factory most physically vulnerable? The fix there might be installing security cameras and putting better locks on mixing vats. See? You can't use a chemical test to stop a terrorist, and you can't use a security camera to stop a greedy supplier. Different threats demand completely different plans. So the next time you're in the grocery store, you have a new lens. You understand the hidden battles being fought just to make sure that what ends up in your cart is safe and genuine. So knowing the difference between a threat motivated by profit and one motivated by harm, does it change how you look at the food on your shelf? Something to think about.